Hello, everyone. This is Marden Willis, your host of podcast UFO, and you're saying, where's the music? Well, I couldn't work that out, but we are live here in Phoenix at the International UFO Congress. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
So we have some people will be rolling in right now. I'm going to go from my right to my left. We have Stanton Friedman. We have Kathleen Marden, Chase Kloetzke, Julie Maranto. You did get married, right?
We did get married.
Okay.
We finally did after 30-some years.
And Sam Maranto. All right, here we are. So let's just start out. We'll start out at the end. Stan, how you doing? This is your second round robin with us live.
Well, I'm doing fine. It's nice to be where it's warm. It was 10 below zero where I lived 2 days ago. So
That's right. You got hung up at the airport as usual.
yeah, I got in 3 hours later than I expected to get in. Yeah, it wasn't fun, but it was nice to get here.
Yeah, great. And we'll say hi to you, Kathleen. Always
Hello.
nice to see you.
Oh, it's great to see you again as well, and great to be back here in Arizona.
Oh, isn't it wonderful?
It is.
It's a paradise.
The weather is great here, and this is just such a great conference with such a large variety of speakers
Right.
spanning the spectrum. And that's something that I really enjoy about this. And it's very well attended for that reason, I believe.
Oh, yeah. I couldn't believe the audience today.
Uh-huh.
And Chase will say hello to you.
Hey, Martin, how are you?
You're back again,
I
and this time in
am.
person.
I love it. It was
Yeah.
so nice meeting you, for sure.
Yes, and I got an email today. Someone was so excited that you're going to be on the show.
Oh, my gosh.
So-
Well,
and
holler back at him.
Before we pass the mic, I want to say you were in Australia, and you made a big splash in Australia. They were really excited to have an American ufologist there.
Yeah.
So why don't you just talk quickly about that?
It was extraordinary to be there. The attention, and there was almost this drive. They just could not get enough. They wanted to hear what we were doing, what's going on, some of the things that are happening. But I soon learned that it had nothing to do with Chase Kloetzke. It had everything to do with being the American, going to Australia. They love it, whether it's the American Football League, anything coming to Australia, they just loved it so much. But it was
Wow.
huge because it was national media, national
That's
radio. It was
unlike so
crazy.
many countries today.
Yes, exactly.
How about that? All right, and Julie.
Hi,
How are
very
you?
nice to meet you, Martin.
Yes.
First time meeting you, and it's a great conference here. I'm here with my husband, Sam Maranto, and we just love it here. It's just the best conference we've ever been to, and the people and the speakers are just excellent, and just so happy to be here, and very nice meeting you and your wife.
Yes.
Thanks a lot for having us.
Yeah. Sam.
Hello.
Hi, Sam. How are you? Always fun having you. Sam helped out with the show
gosh.
way back when, and
Yeah.
you've probably heard him as a guest many times.
Yep. It was, first of all, a pleasure getting out here in some place where I could thaw. And unlike our good friend Stan, we didn't get held up longer than just an hour, I think, longer than. Yeah, how about it?
Yeah.
Jeez. But TSA was nice. They let me come in, and Arizona was nice. 5 years ago I was here, and I think there was a riot that broke out. But, after I left, they were happy about that. And they let me back, so I guess everything healed. We're all good.
Wow.
So happy to be here, my friend.
Yes. Someone was going to show up tonight that accidentally had something the TSA did nab them on, but they did get through. I probably shouldn't say any more than that. So we had a
good UFO book, that's what it was.
yeah, that's right. The government got it. Speaking of that, someone asked a question today, and they said maybe they're a little paranoid, but they wanted to know if anyone thought that there could be possibly government agents in the crowd listening to keep their thumb on what's going on. What do you think about
I
that?
would say yes, of course.
Really?
They'd be amiss in their responsibilities if they didn't. I mean, they're always asking the question, what do these idiots know?
Uh-huh.
And how do we counteract that?
Yeah.
And that's part and parcel of the game. Once you start with the recognition that they've been lying for so long about so much, that doesn't mean everybody's a liar. It means that the rules are in place from the top down.
Yeah.
So there has to be a counter effort all the time to make sure that no good stuff gets through, that the media don't pay attention to the good stuff. And you want to encourage the nasty, noisy negativists and the ancient academics and the fossilized physicists and the SETI cultists, SETI standing for Silly Effort to Investigate. It's fascinating to watch the stuff that goes by in the media. So somebody's paying a lot of attention, and I gave up trying to follow all the crap about me on the internet and in Wiki. Every time I turn around, there's some false information. Somebody's paying attention, but is it worth my time to spend all the effort to try to do something about that? I'll do my thing, and the heck with them.
Yeah. Now, you helped me. We had some email conversation. You helped me just before I debated Michael Shermer.
Oh, yes.
Yes. And so one of the things I was really, really surprised at, he said, yes, the government does lie to us. I mean, he actually admitted that.
Michael admitted that.
Yeah.
What do you know? I'm surprised.
Yeah. But I because it was a past episode, I won't go into it too much, but there was a lot of the typical baloney that you hear of, what do you call them, the nasty, noisy
Nasty, noisy
negativists?
negativists. Ancient academics, fossilized physicists.
So we can talk about anything. I'm going to just throw a topic out there. What do you think about the decline in young people interested in the topic? Or do you see that? Do you not even see that?
I have no reason to think that that's true.
Okay.
Does anybody else?
This has to do with people are talking about young people aren't showing up at conferences. That's what I've been hearing. And I just,
Well, that may be more a factor with regard to what we're providing for young people. What I have found is that it's hard to find a young person who says we're alone in the universe.
yeah,
They all say, surely we're not alone.
yeah,
But of course, the media haven't done a good job. They talk about SETI, and they talk about like this recent stuff with general relativity and stuff, with great excitement.
yep,
But they don't get down to earth with the facts. For example, people are always surprised when I tell them MUFON had 1,000 UFO reports last month. Maybe it was 900, maybe it was 1,100, doesn't matter. They think, I've had people say to me, well, how come there aren't any sightings anymore, Stan? I haven't seen anything. And when I say, well, there were 1,000 last month, oh, really? They don't know.
yeah. I want to roll, and you sort of covered that topic. I think we don't really have to stay on that one. But let's talk about, someone also wrote me today, and they said, no one's going to, it's maybe a great conference, but no one's going to bring anything new to the table. I don't know. What do you, just comments, just your comments on that. Kathleen, do you have anything to say to that?
Well, that's a difficult one, but certainly Barbara Lamb, who is bringing, she says, 6 people who claim to be hybrids to the table is something that I've never seen before.
Yeah.
So certainly that is new. David Jacobs has a new book out called Walking Among Us, where he is talking about his final conclusion, I suppose, on actually what the agenda is, which is different from what most of us researchers believe. But that is, I don't know if it's just happening in New Jersey, or if the rest of us are wrong, or I mean, I can't even speculate about all of the possibilities. But that is something new being brought to the table as well. And, there are a lot of interesting speakers. I haven't been able to go to a lot of the lectures because I have a vendor table.
Yeah.
But certainly I think it's well worth attending.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have anything to add to that, Chase?
Yeah, I'm just, we're talking about CubeSat satellites for the first time ever in a low orbit that are really going to be recording UFO events. When are they coming? What do they look like? Can we capture them? What do they sound like? So we're talking about satellites. For the first time, ufologists own their own. They have their own. We control the photographs. We control the data. There's no agency. It belongs to the boots on the ground. It belongs to the grassroots. We're talking about UFOTOG and just the technology and the things we're doing in the field that are far advancing. What's the best way we can use a drone? Instead of walking into potentially dangerous areas, such as, alleged UFO crashes that, as we just saw in South America, turned out to be a downed Chinese satellite that caused a village to be sick. How about if we can put some monitoring on drones and send them in first to see if these are safe areas for our field investigators that need to go home to their families? The topics that are going on, it is new. and it's brilliant. And I think sometimes when the audience out there will see maybe the same names, there are giants. These guys have been working in this field for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. We want to still hear from them. Their information is relevant, fresh, and new. Or they wouldn't keep coming back, honestly. But yeah, and it's Congress. You can't come with the same old anything. It's Congress.
Yeah, yeah. I'll let Sam answer to that. But before that, I actually do have a way to take a phone call if anyone out there would like to call in. You will be the guinea pig, I will tell you that, because I'm not 100% sure it's going to work right, but we'll give it a try. So if you want to call in at 603-967-4030. And do you have, I think the person that actually texted me today was saying there's nothing new as far as, say, evidence or any like new major reports that we can get our hands on that are something really incredible.
Well, just speaking for what I presented today and what we've been looking at and researching, just from the correlations between certain mass sightings pertaining to these orange orbs, triangular objects, and what has been recorded and what we've actually been able to decipher out of these the video evidence, and also from the witness accounts. The thing is, and Chase brought this up, and I keep trying to reiterate this to people, that the eyewitness account or a witness account, the human element is omnipresent throughout all aspects of anything pertaining to evidence. And that also includes the use and manufacturing of the instrumentation. The thing is, this is always involved. So what we know today is in some of the footage from the Southern Illinois sighting, that arcing motion and of the footage, dictates that we're dealing with something that has, you have these 2 points of illumination, lights, wherever you want. There is something relative to each of them, and either it's time, place, or something is holding them there, and I'm thinking it's something solid. Now, Tinley Park, we had multiple videos with that taking place with these illuminations, object, whatever. So we're dealing with the same phenomena, and I'm assuming it's a large craft. The other thing is the orange orbs, and why do we have cases where we're looking at the same thing? People are talking about orange, reddish orange, yellow. Well, on my own experience, seeing a orange orb static in the sky just sitting there, and then as it took off, Julie and I watched this thing, it was changing color. In other words, I was picking up through my interpretation that it was changing color. Well, what's doing that? Is it the wavelength, or is it my interpretation? Is it the distance, or is it as it moves, it's a different wavelength? So in other words, there is different breakthroughs and different aspects to the evidence, and this is evidence. So it isn't a story. It's not two people getting together, coming up with something. No, it's recorded, it's factual, and these are mass sightings with hundreds, if not thousands, in some instances.
Yeah, amazing. We have someone just stepped in, and if you could pass the mic down to him, please. Eric, and I'm sorry, I don't want to mispronounce your last name, so why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Keith Arem.
Oh, I'm sorry, Keith.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry.
Yeah, Keith Arem, and I'm the
I really
director
got
of
that
the
one off.
Phoenix
Sorry,
Incident.
And Keith, you have something pretty exciting happening, so why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, we have a motion picture that's coming out in theaters. It's going to be premiering with Fathom Events on March 10th at 7:30 nationwide in select theaters. And it's an exciting experience for me coming from the entertainment side and coming into this community and sharing some of the research that we did, but learning more from this community than I could ever hope to imagine to bring from my side. And being here at the International UFO Congress and meeting with all the experts and people like Stanton and Lee and everyone here has been just an amazing, eye-opening experience for me. And after making a movie, our intent has been to bring this to the mass audiences and having them really understand the need for disclosure, or at least understanding what's happening in the skies above. But this is such an amazing community, and the education I'm getting here is beyond anything I could have imagined.
Now, I want to talk about kind of a funny thing that happened. I think it was a year and a half ago. You put out
Our viral campaign.
your viral campaign, and Alejandro came on my show and was talking about, and he was a little perturbed
Yes.
about it. He said, "There's a guy from Seinfeld, and this didn't really happen. The Phoenix Lights." Your movie is called The
Phoenix Incident.
Uh-huh. And can you talk a little bit about that viral campaign?
So about 2.5 years ago, when we started
Oh, that's when
production
it was?
of the film, yeah, well, this actually didn't come out until just last December, which is what you saw.
Yep.
And what we had done in conjunction with the film was we started a handful of websites, which are still out there, which people don't know about yet. We haven't really revealed a lot of this until just now. But we had missing persons sites, we had UFO sites, we had all these things that were part of our story and sort of expanded out the universe of what the world is. But what was most exciting about what we did was that we took some of the footage of the film and started to release it on some of our websites. And that's sort of what got picked up. So we had about 14 seconds of our film that got launched onto one of our hidden websites through a person portrayed in one of the actual investigative journalists that was giving us some of the information about the real event. And that came out, and that was tweeted, and that was shared, and that got picked up by over 2,000 sites across Europe, the U.S., and the Mirror UK ran it on the front cover. And unfortunately, that got found by a lot of real investigators who thought that we were trying to generate a hoax, which it wasn't. It was just actually some of the advanced shots of the film. And so I reached out to Alejandro personally, to Lee at the Huffington Post, and a number of other people, and said, hey guys, look, I am the last person who's trying to hoax anybody. What I'm trying to do is actually use this to propel this message of disclosure. We're doing a Hollywood film, but we have some very real things in our movie. And that has continued. So our viral campaign is now over 20 million views worldwide. And we're kind of showing Hollywood that you don't have to be through a large movie studio to actually get the attention of the right audience. And it just also shows how much people are really interested in this subject. That the mainstream audiences who don't know about all the sightings, that don't know everything that's happened, they don't even know what happened in Phoenix, we're using this as a platform to say, look, we just want an open conversation with our government, with our military, and to say, if this is swamp gas, then tell us, we can handle that. If this is going to be atmospheric phenomenon, if 99% of all the sightings in the world could be explained by military craft or anything else, I'd be fine with that. But if that 1% that can't be explained is actually real, that's all I need. I just need that one sighting. And if that one sighting is real, everything else is.
Yeah, I think we've been saying that in the field. I'm not saying that I'm in the field, but I think people are, don't you say that's kind of a common thing we've been saying? If we can just grab the evidence from one real sighting,
right,
that's all it means. And I want to say I had a nice conversation today with the girl that's here from the Ariel school incident. And I got goosebumps talking to this girl because she was there and she saw it. And she said, I'm only here to talk about what really happened and what I saw. And if anyone is listening and they want to check that out, just go into Ariel School incident and you'll see John Mack interviewing these kids. And it's real moving. And so I was really excited to talk to her. She cannot really speak about too much because she has a non-disclosure agreement before the movie actually comes out. But Randall Nickerson is supposed to be in here. We have a number of people that are supposed to be stopping in, and they'll be moving in. Thank you for that. And the name of the movie, and again, the release?
Yes, so the movie is The Phoenix Incident, and it's going to be coming out on March 10th with Fathom Events. And you just go to fathomevents.com and look up your city, and you'll be able to see it there. We're going to be including a lot of special interviews and roundtables with experts like Stanton here, and we're going to be talking about the fact and fiction behind the movie, and then we're going to be expanding that out, and we're going to be releasing an interactive app, so a lot of the experts that are here will be able to sort of communicate with the audience and share what they know, specific to just our film and also the other incidents around the world.
Okay. So just a lesson, because I just heard this online, sounds a little low, so we got to keep the mic up near. These are, the one thing about these mics is they're good, they want to hear the background noise, but we have to be, including myself, have to be right up to them. All right, thank you.
Absolutely.
And let's see, let's move the mic to Kathleen And Kathleen, you wanted to speak about the conference in Brazil, so go ahead and tell us about that if you would.
Yes. In December, I spoke in Brazil for the first time at A.J. Gevard's conference,
Yeah.
and it was at Iguaçu Falls. It was very interesting to me because I wanted to an update on the latest abduction information in Brazil. And so often in the United States, we hear about really negative abductions down there, that people are observing little brown creatures with red eyes, and some have little horns, and they sound almost devilish in a sense. People have been burned. People have been killed from burns in cases down there. Of course, we had the Antonio Villas-Boas case dating all the way back to 1957, which was different, where he reported engaging in sexual activity with what sounds like a hybrid on board the craft. And, even though it was very frightening, it didn't harm him except for the radiation burns that he sustained from being in contact with the craft. But what I found out when I was in Brazil in December is that many people are being contacted by the Greys, just like here and just like every place else. And also people who look very human, but they have a human appearance, but not human behavior. So I found that extremely interesting, that seems to be predominating in Brazil now, according to the people from Brazil that I talked to, the researchers.
Last night I went up to David Jacobs, and I said, David, what do you think about these hybrids coming in? And he went, he didn't want to talk about it.
Well, I'm really anxious to go to Barbara's lecture tomorrow morning, because I've been told that she has brought in 6 hybrids, and that we're going to get to hear about them and hopefully take a look at them.
Someone just popped up a question on the message board. Has anyone ever, but we're talking about it right now. He wants to know about hybrids. Can anyone say that they've actually ever seen one? Someone that's a
I have
hybrid?
met people who claim to be hybrids, but they haven't given me any
Yeah.
evidence. They haven't taken
Wouldn't there be like a
DNA
DNA?
tests or done anything to convince me that that is true, but they believe that they are.
Chase or, yeah. And anything in particular peculiar about these people that are claiming this that you've seen or talked to?
I remember about 10 years ago that I was approached by a couple that claimed to be hybrids, and they said that you could tell because the ears, they didn't have earlobes, their ears were more attached to the head, and they were, kind of coming out with, the eyes were more almond or maybe oriental in feature. And, I sat and I listened, and of course, then you start seeing it everywhere. Well, one thing I did do was kind of put my hair back because I don't have earlobes. And
I knew you were a hybrid.
Yes. And I'm pretty sure, I'm 99.9% sure I'm completely human. And I just thought it was, odd, to come out with features like that. And, but they were presenting some of these as, fact, or this is exactly how you can tell. And, we're just going to need more than that. What I'm finding, though, is have we sent DNA in? Yes, we have. We haven't gotten any come back anomalous or different. So I think the question that we're asking now is how different is the DNA, and do we have the technology now in the genetic genome to identify it? So there's still some questions, but absolutely, just like I said in my talk today, when people asked, what would you do if you had access to a hybrid? My first question would be, can I have some DNA?
Yeah.
I usually carry that swab kit with me everywhere I go.
Yeah, at 20, someone just wrote on the message board, I've heard of this too. At 23andMe, it's $100 for a DNA test. I mean, it's really come such a long way.
It is. That's a little different. That's going to give you, whether you're Italian or Scottish, but it is less. He's absolutely right, or whoever asked that question. The DNA for kind of testing human or animal or plant, absolutely, is only about $150 versus the 99. But
And you can when a lab is doing a DNA test, you can trust the lab?
why would they lie?
Yeah.
The one thing I don't do is tell them why. It's, hey, I have a DNA sample, and can you let me know if there's anything odd or different? I don't say, hey, I think I have a hybrid. It's just like when I send my metals out.
Yeah.
I don't use UFO analysts because, to me, invisibility, I need completely independent.
Are you
But I
talking
also
about
don't tell them
possible-
that this is allegedly metals.
So are you talking about some trace evidence from a landing or something? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I just don't send them to people that are known for UFO evidence. Because to meet the burden of proof and to meet admissibility, we have to have that independence. If we keep using UFO people to prove our evidence or to analyze our evidence, it's like the prosecution using only their witnesses, and that'd be
Yeah.
okay with the public and the scientists. It's only going to go so far. So I just cut the head off the snake right away. I just go independent.
Yeah.
I use my colleagues as that peer review, but
Now, has anyone ever heard the story about Ray Stanford at the Socorro incident? And in the footprint of where the craft landed, there was a rock and there was a metal on it that Hynek or no one else saw, but he dug around and found a big metal scrape on it. He brought it to Goddard Space Center, and he said, whatever you do, he says, just take a small part of this. He says, please leave it on. They had his word. Didn't hear from anyone forever, kept trying to get information on it and get information on it. He went back there and the rock was scraped clean.
had a case in Columbus, Ohio, and the witness, Benny Foggin, has a medal, and his medal and evidence has disappeared as well.
Yeah.
Most of it. He only has half of it. The other half, which he believes was the most anomalous half, has absolutely been taken from him.
Yeah.
And that is theft. When witnesses do not get their evidence back, when these labs hold things because, or skirt them away or put them in a safe, it's theft. It's not theirs. This evidence belongs to the people that had those experiences, period.
Yeah. Stan, hopefully our microphones are working right. We're not going to hear all that noise.
Okay.
Stan, you and I have talked about trace evidence and stuff like that in the past. Do you have any experience with any, evidence disappearing or anything?
Not really, no. Not that it comes to mind at the moment.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's a bigger picture here. We can go along with all the same kinds of reports that we've had for the last 40 years. We're looking for something more than that. Now, some of this probably will come from recognition on the part of some part of the scientific community that they're full of baloney about you can't get here from there and all that sort of stuff. This is nonsensical kind of stuff coming from the supposedly scientific community. So I'm hoping that there'll be a breakthrough when the younger generation of these guys recognizes that, guys and gals, I should know, recognizes that there is evidence out there. Where we have gone astray to some extent is to not insist when somebody expresses opinions, I don't care how many degrees they have, that it's based on evidence, not on supposed lack of evidence. In other words, their ignorance is not our problem. They should have the evidence in hand or examine the evidence in hand before they do their research by proclamation, which is so often the case. And I do a monthly column for the MUFON journal, Perceptions. And a frequent subject is the false arguments made by the educated non-believer who doesn't know what he's talking about. And I think more people need to stand up and be counted and point out that this is simply nonsense. We get a lot of that. It's as silly as the comment that the proof that the government can't keep secrets is how much we know about President Clinton's genitalia.
Yeah.
What has this got to do with governments
Yes,
keeping secrets? Absolutely nothing.
Who said that? Was it Seth or was it Neil deGrasse Tyson?
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yes.
He said it to 1,800 people at Penn State University. This was not a small little
Class
gathering
act.
of friends kind of thing. And there are lots of those kinds of comments out there. And I do wish more people would be willing to stand up and say, this is simply nonsense, and
Yeah.
point out why. And that's the problem, that to some extent the media doesn't know who's qualified because he's got a degree behind his name. That means he's qualified to express an opinion about stuff about which he knows nothing. And
Speaking of that, I'm sorry, I didn't
That's
mean
right.
to interrupt you. There's a question up on the message board, and just say, what do you think about people mentioning no names that claim to know about UFO propulsion?
Well, I think there's a lot of theoretical nonsense out there. I think there are certain things we can say. For example, if you're going to talk about the latest stuff, you might pay attention to the simple fact that almost all the energy in the universe is produced by nuclear fusion. That's not mythical. All the stars produce their energy by nuclear fusion. Some at higher rates than others. There's a big spread, of course, just like not all people are 6 feet tall. But beyond that, I've heard lots of theoretical constructs, and I haven't found anything to back them up. It isn't enough to sit down and come up with a theory. You need to show something. Show me, don't tell me.
Well, there was that one theory of the forward propulsion through like a plasma energy beam, and Mirabeau was involved in researching that.
Leek
Did you-
Mirabeau, yes, I know
Yeah.
Leek. He was doing some interesting work. I'll give him credit. Some of the other stuff I've seen isn't so interesting. Theory isn't good enough here. You need practice. You need facts.
Yeah.
Did somebody try it? Don't tell me you got the greatest idea since peanut butter if nobody has made it and tasted it, you know? And so I hear lots of stuff. Also, a lot of people don't seem to understand that there is a national security aspect to the whole question of UFO propulsion. I mean, we live on a planet which is spending $1 trillion this year on the military. $1 trillion. There's no question that everybody would love to be able to build dozens of craft that behave the way the UFOs behave. So, you know, you can talk and talk and talk. And I'm not saying there isn't classified work going on. I'm sure there is. I worked in the classified world for 14 years. It's easy to keep secrets. The simplest way is not to tell anybody. I mean, I get people saying me stupid things like on the MJ-12 stuff, just to get off to that side a little bit, that, well, surely those guys would have told their wives what they were doing. Absolutely not. I had a clearance for 14 years. I never told my wife anything classified. I don't know anybody who has. It's counterproductive. You're breaking the rules. You might lose your job. But you can't control what your wife says or where she says it or to whom she says it.
Yeah.
And there are technological secrets here. If we have them, we don't want anybody else to get.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not enough to say, well, we'll only tell the people we like. You can't keep secrets that way. You can't tell your friends without telling your enemies. Basic rule for security.
Right. Now, I don't want the show to be all you, but I still have one more question to ask while that you have the microphone, and that is, I've heard the statement many times that we only know what the military has, say, 10 years back from what they actually have and tests, and just your thoughts on that.
Well, I think there's some truth to that, frankly. On the other hand, one thing we got to talk about is money here. It costs a lot of money to develop anything new and different, whether it's a stealth aircraft. The example I give, it's homely, but when I was working on nuclear airplanes for General Electric in 1958, that year our division spent $100 million. We employed 3,500 people, of whom 1,100 were engineers and scientists. Now, $100 million in 1958 was a lot of money. So you don't get anywhere with a useful system. When I was working on nuclear rockets, we were spending almost $100 million a year on those programs. And people don't realize we've actually operated, 3 different organizations have operated nuclear fission rockets way back in the 60s. Aerojet General, Westinghouse Astronuclear, and Los Alamos Scientific Lab. Now, a couple of the numbers are significant. Los Alamos's system produced a power of 4,400 megawatts. Now, to put that in perspective, Hoover Dam produces 2,000 megawatts. We're talking twice that.
Wow.
This was something less than 8 feet in diameter, and the exhaust temperature was over 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
Gee.
Now, this is just outside the normal realm of what people are doing. This is a long time ago.
Wow.
And the programs were canceled.
Huh.
I mean, what can I say? Comes time to cut the mustard, and they put it away. So what's missing in a lot of these things, people forget how important the Cold War was. Am I asking for a return of the Cold War? I gather we're getting that to some extent these days. But I'm not asking for that. But people have no idea how much money was spent on the basis of, we can do something better than the Russians can. Give us some money and we'll show you. Lots of dough was spent that way. And without that pressure, it was hard to find far-seeing people to develop the technology of the future, unless you have a direct current application for it that makes you stronger against the guys you want to be stronger against. And that's hard to show oftentimes. So we live in a complicated kind of world here. But there is no national need for being able to go to the stars when you boil it down. What's the motivation? Why would you spend the money? And people aren't aware of what we spent on nuclear power for ships. Simple number. And I know people have heard me say this before. We have nuclear-powered aircraft carriers that can operate for 18 years without refueling. Now think about that for a minute. If your ship isn't tied to the gas station, so to speak, in warfare, makes one heck of a big difference, because you don't need the space on board the ship, for one thing. And you can keep going, go as fast as you can for as long as you can. If you're going to use fuel, diesel fuel, let's say, you can't do that. You run out of fuel pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So there are many different sides of this kind of thing. And I don't think we've got it sorted out at all. And we don't have a generation of newsmen who are knowledgeable enough to really dig into this kind of thing, as far as I can tell, anyway. They don't know the right questions to ask or who to ask them of.
Right. Well, thank you. Let's see. I'll just throw this question out there. While we're sort of on the topic, does anyone have any thoughts on, you always hear people are saying reverse engineering alien technology.
Well, I don't understand your philosophy on that. I would think, getting back to where we are with the military, we had recently, was it maybe in October or something, we had an event, a state event, MUFON event, and one of the attendees was a astrophysicist, and no, it was aerodynamics. That's what his experience, and rocket ships and everything cool, And he's a professor at one of the universities, University of Illinois, Urbana, and he was saying pretty much anything we have in the arsenal that we know about today used to be 10 years is what they actually have. Oh, no, that's years ago. He says we can think many years beyond that. So as far as reverse engineering or advanced engineering or anything pertaining to anti-gravitics, I can't see why it wouldn't be into play. I can't see why not. Some of the craft that we're seeing, is it our technology? I don't know. It is technology. Now, where's the blueprint from? I don't know. But I would like to think that maybe some of this is ours. It makes me feel a little more comfortable. I don't know.
Yeah.
Stan doesn't agreement with me on that, but
Well, not fully. I think, consider aliens coming to Christopher Columbus and say, hey, Chris, nice job. We need a little help. Got an unlimited budget. I need 2 more nuclear submarines. And Chris would say, what in the world are you talking about? Money's no object. But there was no way we could have built a nuclear submarine. Take my cheap digital wristwatch. There is no way, the year I was born, 1934, that you could have analyzed the chip in the first place. And certainly no way you could duplicate the chip. The chips are cheap today, but it costs Intel $1 billion to build a facility. And so there's certain limits on what you're able to do because you don't have the tools to do it with. I remember we were looking at corrosion in nuclear submarines where you used a liquid metal, sodium-potassium alloy, as the heat transfer agent, much more efficient than water. The trouble is sometimes you'd get corrosion and sometimes you couldn't. And corrosion, if your pipe splits, is not a good thing, believe me. And it turns out, it took years to recognize, that the difficulty was determining the amount of oxygen in the liquid metal. Our analytical techniques at that time were simply not good enough to show any difference between stuff that worked and stuff that didn't. It took a long time before we figured out better analytical techniques. So there are a lot of things that it's easy to say, well, you got yourself a flying saucer, by 10 years from now you should be flying one. It's not that simple. It really isn't, because we're talking about the edges of things. We got a long way to go. We've learned a heck of a lot that we didn't know 5, 10, 20, 30 years ago. But there's more to learn. That's the thing. We think, well, we've reached the limit. Now we're all set. We can build anything. Just show it to me and I'll build you one. That sounds good, but it doesn't work that way in the world that I've lived in.
Did you ever hear about a console that was given to NASA for them to try to figure it out? Have you
No.
ever heard that? Okay, this was an old-time researcher was telling me about this the other day. Chase, I want to ask you a question. Down, Chase, please. You had that amazing triangle sighting, and you're actually in the intro of my. So that thing flew right over your head. That was an incredible night. You saw lights in the sky first, doing all kinds of weird stuff, and then the person who's been reporting the triangle said to you, "Well, here it is," and it came right over your head. If you had to guess, would you think that that could have been made by us?
Back in 2010, I would have said absolutely not. I never said this in my report or, professionally, and I really don't talk about it very much anyway, but I absolutely would have said that. However, I am a believer in a secret space program, and I do believe that we have technology that we're unaware of as a general public. However, I do completely agree with Stanton that there are certain things we're just not going to get. We have to put them on the shelf for a little bit. And as we learn and as things unfold, we get a better understanding. Because, I've said on your show, I don't believe they're coming here in a full tank of gas and a Red Bull. I think they're absolutely using a type of physics that we haven't discovered yet, which is why our scientists will say, well, this is why I know that we're not being visited. How are they getting to these places? How are they getting to these vast stars? Well, of course, we have answers to that, so it's just benighted anyway. But I do believe now that I could have possibly seen, maybe it was ours, but then there's other things about that evening that, that's a part of that evening. Something was wrong. I still say to this day, bull crap. Nobody gets everything in one night. And the second thing that every time I think of that event that I think of is I know something was wrong, something was off, and I still can't put my finger on it.
But you could feel, you just had that feeling that something was, did you have like an odd feeling when you got out of the truck that night to go out into the field?
No. I
No.
had absolutely no idea anything was going to happen at all.
Yeah.
When we first got there, the witness had pulled us to the, kind of the end of his driveway, and we're kind of looking over a field. So we saw these little objects, like come and maneuver. At that point, I was good. I was like, woo, that was pretty cool. It was when he suggested we get in the truck and then we go to the cornfield because it has a big panoramic view. At that point, I'm still thinking, actually had my iPad out, and I'm working on what those lights could possibly be at that point, trying to, snap photos. We left with almost 600 photos of everything from orange orbs to, so.
Wow.
But it was still one of those evenings where I'm still looking for answers.
Yeah.
Definitely, government, hologram, who knows what was going on, but it was ridiculous, except I was there, I know exactly what we saw, and to this day, stand on every word of it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I'm going to pose a question anybody can answer. I hope one of you does. And that is, let's say that it doesn't really matter whether it's now or 500,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago that we were visited because of the way civilizations could develop on different planets. But you know what? I'm going to just keep that thought, everyone, because we just had the one and only Lee Speigel.
Yeah. Is he here?
Holla!
Walked in the door.
Passed him in the room.
Lee, say hello.
Hello.
Hi, how you doing? So, Lee, I want you to tell everyone what you're selling here, because no, the
I'm
whole
selling
story.
a line.
The whole story about what you're selling is just an incredible. I know you and I have talked on the show about it before, but we're talking about the United Nations, and back in 1978, was this?
Well, the United Nations was 1978, and this gentleman sitting to my right was one of my
Stan.
main speakers at the UN, Mr. Stanton Friedman, who hates it when I refer to him as Dr. Friedman.
Because I'm not
It seems like a lot of people do that. Yeah.
But 3 years ahead of the United Nations, I put together a documentary record album called UFOs, The Credibility Factor. That was for CBS. And as many people know, because I love telling this story, Dr. Friedman here was the very first person I interviewed for the album. Back when he was living out on the West Coast.
Right.
And,
yeah.
and that's when we first met. And I liked him so much that I have memorized almost all of his catchphrases from all of his lectures, and I've stolen them so many times.
It's okay.
Flying saucers are real. Don't forget that one.
Oh, no, better catchphrases than that. And he hasn't charged me for using any of these phrases, so that's been very nice. But the credibility factor was the first time that the voices of military people, scientists, politicians, astronauts came together to talk about not only UFO encounters they may have had, but to express their very strong opinions on how trying to get the government to open up on the phenomenon. This was back in the days before anyone started using the word disclosure, because I wasn't saying that. I didn't set out to do this by saying, well, I want disclosure. I didn't know what disclosure was. I relied on talking to these people to tell me about the subject. And luckily, I met some really amazing people in addition to Stan. I mean, the original whistleblower of UFOs, Major Donald Kehoe.
Yeah.
I think he was the original. You probably, Stan, you would probably, maybe, yeah. And Dr. Hynek, Gordon Cooper, astronaut Jim McDivitt, psychologist David Saunders, who was a member of the Condon Committee, the official committee that looked into UFOs. He was there. Amazing researcher Len Stringfield was part of our original team trying to put the United Nations. Oh, what am I saying? I'm already at the United Nations again. We're talking about the album. My projects are suddenly blending into each other, and now I'm feeling. Now I'm feeling my age. I've just had a UFO senior moment. So forgive me.
The one of many to come.
Oh, thanks. But the album was amazing because it was the first time that a major company like CBS even backed a product like this. It was the first time that a UFO product of any kind was advertised in a 2-minute primetime television commercial, which was one of the reasons why I went to them to try and do this, because at the time, in 1975, CBS had a division called Columbia House. And basically all of us who are old enough to remember this, you'd be watching TV and suddenly a commercial would come on. It would be the great Mantovani strings for like $9.95 or Mitch Miller and the gang, his greatest hits. And these were like original little infomercials that were put on television. And I thought, boy, it would be great to put something together and get it advertised on TV. That had never been done before as far as UFOs. And CBS said, okay, we'll go for it. It was astonishing to me.
Yeah.
And I traveled around the country. It was the first time I'd ever flown, and I was flying everywhere, talking to great people like Stan, and putting the script together and getting some nice music, and we put the documentary out, and it's still amazing to me. And years later, 40 years later now, people have been asking me, when am I ever going to re-release this?
And that's what you did.
And that's what I'm doing
Yep.
at the 2016 International UFO Congress. It's being re-released as now a digital CD.
Don't forget Boxcar Willie, someone says. This question is for you, Lee. And did you ever hear anything more about the UFO incident in Lumberton, North Carolina?
No. While I was putting together my UFO album in '75, Dr. Hynek called and asked me to go to Lumberton, North Carolina, where he was getting reports by law enforcement officials. They were seeing something strange in the sky a couple of nights in a row, and they had no idea what it was. He didn't have any investigators there, so he asked me if I would go down and check it out. And I said, well, what are they reporting? And he said, well, it's something new. We haven't really heard much about this, but it's a triangular shape. It's a boomerang shape. And I said, wait a minute, you're asking me to go to rural North Carolina and I'm not going to see a classic flying saucer? Because that's what I really prefer. And he said, look, if you don't want to go, and I said, no, don't finish that thought. I'm going, because you're the last person I want to alienate right now, to coin a word. And I said, yeah, I'm gone, I'll go. And within 3 hours of my arrival there, I hit the jackpot. I mean, it was amazing.
That was and there's a painting here I saw that showed the incident. A beam of light came down, the whole works.
This triangular object hovered in the air directly above me and a group of sheriff's people, highway patrolmen, and it had a row of white lights up one side, red lights up the other, and at the apex was a brighter light, and the thing came across the field to where we were standing, and it made no sound. It had no engine whatsoever. And it stopped directly above us and hovered. And it was only at that point when, because of the reflection of the lights underneath it, that we could see the shape of it. But the lights reflected a triangular shape. And as we watched it, and as I was feeling a combination of terror and exhilaration, because I was thinking, well, I'm safe because I'm surrounded by police officers with their guns. and then another moment later, the rational part of me said, are you kidding, you idiot? If this thing is here to eat you, you're an appetizer.
This guy's, that's his hometown that asked that question.
In Lumberton?
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing, because I loved being there and met some amazing people, especially in law enforcement, and they couldn't have been nicer. They wanted to know what was going on. And, and the final thing that happened to me there was, as we watched it, at the brightest point of where the light was in the triangle, it shot a beam of light down to where we were.
Wow.
And that whole moment is captured in this painting that's here at the Congress.
Was there anything unusual about that beam of light?
No, we didn't feel any kind of energy. It was just very, very difficult to look at directly. It's like if you're driving past a construction site and they're using magnesium flares and and it's hard to look at those flares because they're so bright. That's what this was like.
Wow.
Only lasted maybe a couple of seconds, went back up into the craft, turned an amber color, and it moved slowly away as if to say, I'm done with you guys. I'm going to go bother someone else.
All right, caller. Can you hear me,
Hello,
caller? You're going to have to.
yep.
You're going to have to mute your show.
Yep,
Mute the show.
I already know that. John Tackett here. You know who I am.
Caller, you're on, but you're going to have to mute your show.
It's muted.
Yes.
Yep.
All right. So go ahead and say your name and.
My name is John Tackett.
You have to shut off. I'm going to have to hang up on you. You're going to have to shut off the show.
It's off. I really don't have it on. I'm serious.
But you're going to have to mute your show.
It's muted. It's not playing.
Yes. Yep. All right, so go ahead and say your name and...
My name is John Tackett. Let me try calling on a different number. Maybe it's because I'm on my Magic Jack. Okay.
Sorry about that, everyone. Looks like I got a little editing to do.
This confusing moment was brought to you by.
The live listeners. Maybe we can't take calls, but we'll try that again if you want to try in a different number. So thank you, Lee, and we're going to pass the baton down here to our new arrival. We have Ben Hansen. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thank you. How's it going?
It's going great. We've been talking about all different types of topics, but okay. Thank you, Lee. It was great.
Thank you, guys.
Great that you came in. Okay. We've been hitting on all types of topics, and I'll just throw one out at you, and that is, we were talking about military. I'm trying to give you a question that you may be able to. We're talking about
Sure.
military and UFOs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you have your night vision and all that. Do you ever think that you're seeing anything secret military when you're, I know you've spotted a lot of unidentified objects with the night vision.
Sure. I think that's very possible. I think a large portion of what people are seeing now.
Hold on, we're going to try this call one more time.
Sure.
Okay. You're seeing anything secret military when you're, I know you've I'm sorry, caller, it's not going to work. Unidentified
Okay.
5-minute delay.
I don't know why it's coming through the Skype, but anyway, so go ahead.
No, I think it's very possible. I think a lot of what people might be seeing could be military. My question has always been, though, in some of my own personal experiences, if the point of a military exercise is to keep it secret, right, until you're ready to reveal it to the public, why would you do so over highly populated areas?
That's what I've been saying. Anyone that listens to the show has heard me say that at least 4 times recently.
Yeah.
And there was someone that had an answer for that, that sent me an answer, and they said that they need to test over all different types of levels of ground. That was one answer, and so that's why they go to different places, the different levels of propulsion or whatever. And then the other one was they wanted to see what the reaction was.
I would be more inclined to buy the second one.
Yeah.
The first one, look at what they're dubbing Area 52, Dugway, Utah. It's far, far greater than Area 51. You have all types of terrain you could be testing things with out there. With testing the public's reaction, I guess, you look at China. I can't remember the name of the jet that they released, but they do these publicity stunts sometimes to let the enemy know, look what we have, and they'll leak it out. And say, we just tested this new missile we just launched, or this jet, and they act as if it was a mistake, but in reality, they're kind of flexing their muscles, to show the other country, or countries, the world powers, what they have. Now, in this case, though, not really anyone's talking about it except for the few people who witness it, or the few thousand, if you include like Phoenix, if that were military, it really doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
I think they got plenty of space where they could test things if they wanted to keep it a secret. Plus,
where they build these things too, right? They're not going to build them in a.
And we're not living in the same world we were in the 40s, 50s, 60s. When my grandfather was working at Wright-Patterson, he took his oaths to the grave. Now we've got people, like Snowden and those that it's very hard to keep a secret. If something is that big, there are people who are going to leak it, people who are disgruntled. It would take, how many people, for example, the Apollo moon landings, those who still contest that we never went there. I want to say was it $400 billion spent on the Apollo missions, and
Is that what it was? Wow.
and how many thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, people were working on that in some aspect or another. Okay, so that's Saturn rocket technology, and now we're talking about an anti-gravitic propulsion. How many scientists, how many people working on these things that supposedly that we're building and flying everywhere, that something wouldn't come out by now. I don't know. I haven't eliminated it, but I find it difficult to believe.
You would think so. And another thing, if something does have anti-gravity, it doesn't matter how big it is. So that does make sense when people are saying, like the Phoenix Lights craft was over a mile wide. If something
Sure.
has no, if gravity has no effect on it, it doesn't really matter how big it is. And people are still reporting.
Well, and I would just quickly add, I wouldn't surprise me if we found out that the Navy, for example, has had a space agency going to the moon and building structures. Nothing surprises me anymore. So I'm not saying they don't have an arm of that, but I'm saying, look, a lot of what I've seen flying over the populated areas, that I can't explain as, having military origin.
Yeah. Do you want to?
The historical perspective, that's what gets me with some of these objects, plus the fact that, they're huge, and say, for instance, like on Tinley, there's this massive object there. What if something does go wrong and it comes down? That's going to be a tough one to cover up. If you wipe out 1,000 homes or a couple thousand homes, you have to take this into consideration. And the other thing is, something that's moving around like it did, this isn't something new. Whoever is operating it knows what they're doing, and it's functioning top end. So
Yes.
there's nothing experimental about it.
Take this into consideration. And the other thing is, something that's moving around.
Kathy, we haven't heard from you in a while, but does anyone want to talk about the subject I brought up about it doesn't really matter as far as time goes, if it's 10,000 years ago or 1,000,000 years ago or 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, why there wasn't sightings then or more recorded, or people talking about abductions or anything like that? Okay. Does anyone want to answer to that?
Well, one indication that they've been going on for thousands of years is Dr. Barry Downing's fine book, The Bible and Flying Saucers. He goes back a few thousand years, the Old and the New Testament. Barry has a degree in physics, plus a doctor of divinity, so he's our expert on divine physics, I guess you could say. And he goes through the Old and New Testaments and finds all kinds of stories that we would call not flying saucers, because who used a saucer back then? It was mugs. But strange craft. And I heard a paper that had a profound effect on me at a conference. A husband and wife couple looked at 11 different civilizations, old civilizations, and they all had stories, myths, call it what you want, legends, about craft coming down from the sky with beings on board. Not angelic, but craft. And so when you get 11 out of 11, that means stuff's been going on for some time. I mean, for all I know, the extraterrestrial travel agencies send people here every once in a while for their thesis research, working on the development of a primitive society, I think the big kicker here is I believe that we live in a local galactic neighborhood that's got loads of civilizations in it. The current estimates are that for every star, there's a planet, on the average, one. It could be 9, it could be 0. But when you figure, that means that within 100 light years of here, there's 10,000 planets. That's a big number. And so I think there's a lot of commerce. There's a lot of societies that come and go. There are disasters that happen. A little asteroid lands in the wrong place. Supernova goes up, whatever. So I think what we're dealing with here really is our own ego. Earthlings like to think they're important. Mm-hmm. The universe is built around us, isn't it? Well, I don't think it is. And I think that we're certainly not the most advanced civilization in the neighborhood. When you figure the Earth's 4 billion years old, 4 billion, not 4,000. So I think that there's a lot going on in the neighborhood, and we're the Johnny-come-latelys. Look, there are still tribes in distant parts of our own planet who don't know that there are a lot of other tribes out there, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it's hard for us to wrap ourselves around the notion we're not the center of the universe. I don't care how many degrees you've got. That's one of the basic assumptions. If somebody were coming here, they'd land on the White House lawn and, they'd tell us, share all their information, which is so much baloney as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Travis Walton just walked in, and I'd like you to say hello, Travis. And also, I want to talk, you had was it the 40th this year?
Yeah, 40th anniversary conference.
Yeah, well, welcome to the show.
And first week in November.
Yeah, and what was that like? How'd that go?
It went real well, and we would have been in the black until the school buses got stuck in the mud. Yeah.
Mud in Arizona?
Oh, yeah, there was plenty of mud. But they made us responsible for getting them out, and they charged $1,800 to tow them 50 yards back to the hard road.
Oh, my God. Wow. So it was going good until that happened.
Until that happened.
Yeah, yeah. And that was called the
Sky Fire
Summit. Yeah. And I just drove on the way out here, just drove through Heber. I was telling you about that. Heber. I always say that wrong. Mm-hmm. And I forgot to look for the phone booth.
Still
you
there.
did the phone booth. Everyone went to the phone booth and went up on the site where everything happened and all that, right? Yeah.
And the service station where the men met with the sheriff's office was abandoned, but it was still there. We went there, but last week it was bulldozed. There's nothing left now.
Oh, wow.
After all these years.
Now, I saw you speaking earlier today to the girl that's part of the aerial school. She's here, and we were talking about, some of the credible cases out there, and yours being one of them. And what do you think about that? That incident, to me, is one of the most profound incidents.
Oh, yeah. I first met her and some of the other school kids from that incident during the filming of 701, the movie.
Yep.
And I was very interested to learn about what it felt like to them to receive this communication from these entities, because it was very excruciating for me, and it wasn't for them. So that made me more certain that the discomfort that I was feeling because of it was because of my injuries at the time.
Yeah, right. And I remember the one thing that you said, and we're only going to be able to run the show for another 10 minutes or so because I know everyone has to leave. But I remember what you said was the eyes were the scariest thing, and I believe that's one of the things they talk about too. It seems like everyone
That's
does.
true, but on reflection and a lot of thinking about it, it wasn't just the sight of their eyes. It was the way, and that was what I was talking about, is the school kids. The communication came through this stare. Mm-hmm. And I was at a conference recently where a medical doctor come up to me and said, the only opening from the brain through the skull is through the eyes. So if they have some sort of a telepathic energy they're projecting, then it would make sense that it would come through the eyes. And I was getting this extremely uncomfortable feeling with it that the school kids did not get. So I think it was indication of the injury that I just had.
Yeah. I mean, you think now that you probably weren't supposed to be there and it was a rescue mission.
Right. That I was accidentally injured and forced them to clean up my mess, so to speak.
Yeah. So they're saying, what are we going to do with this guy? That type of thing. Yeah.
Rather than leaving me as galactic roadkill.
At least they didn't do that. Well, thanks for coming in. And
nice to join you.
And so let's see, Kathy, we haven't talked to you for quite a while.
Yes.
So we were talking about ancient, sightings or whatever. What do you think about early abductions? Have you ever heard anything about?
It's interesting to me because a woman from Toronto, Canada, who is a religious scholar, wrote to me in response to my book with Denise Stoner, The Alien Abduction Files. And she is a fundamentalist Christian. And she wrote a very respectful paper, about 50 pages long, where she quoted biblical scripture. And her quotes spoke to many of the details that we receive from experiencers today. including the hybridization process, where the seed of gods was mixed with the women of man. And so she spoke about those characteristics. Now, her take on all of this, based upon her religious philosophy, is that it is all satanic, because she said, well, if it is a hybrid, then it can't be human. And if it is not human, then it has to be exterminated. So that...
Oh, yeah.
Right, because the idea is that only spiritual life can exist on Earth,
Yeah.
and any life elsewhere is not godlike or spiritual.
Wow.
It was really food for thought, and her paper is online. I wish I had the URL for that. Maybe I can post it on my website at kathleen-marden.com when I arrive home, if anybody wants to read that paper. It was very, very interesting, that kind of perspective, and it made me wonder, if these were actually extraterrestrials, were they running a hybridization process way back, and perhaps that's what it was all about. Maybe they were transforming humans in a way that many experiencers today believe they are transforming humans into sort of a higher kind of self, a new human that is kinder and gentler and less likely to exterminate itself.
I'm going to say something a little esoteric here, even in this setting, and that is, as far as humans go, scientists believe that they're only, 200,000 years old, and for some reason I find that hard to believe, and it just doesn't. I know 200,000 years is a long time, but it just doesn't seem like it's long enough. If it's type of an, when you're talking evolution and all that, if we evolved from apes and all that, I think that's a little. I'm interested in that stuff, but I just think it's 200,000 years just doesn't seem like could be long enough for us to be human. It makes you wonder if perhaps, it could open up all kinds of questions, whether we were seeded, whether we're some type of hybrid or whatever from somewhere else. Why are there different races? Why are, there's so many questions. It really makes you wonder. Just speculating, just throwing that out there.
There really are, and I'm becoming more and more interested in pursuing this train of thought and learning more about that. And I've begun to study different religions and the points of view from different religious groups. Now, Christians make up a third of the world, but then second is Muslims. And when you think of their angels, their jinns who are, they sort of run the spectrum as I understand it. I had always thought that they were demonic, but no, from what I'm reading from Muslim scholars, they're not. They can be. They're sort of shapeshifters who can be a number of different things. And some religious groups would be more likely to be able to accept the presence of ETs on Earth than others as well.
Yeah. It seems like the Catholic religion's at least opening up to the possibility of extraterrestrial life, and they want to baptize them.
Yes.
I'm sure that's the first thing that'll be on their mind.
Said that they would baptize them if they came here.
Yeah.
And Corrado Balducci who was at the Vatican, friend of the Pope during his time. He's now deceased. But he had done a study because he was interested, he was a demonologist. He was interested in determining whether or not this was demonic, whether or not it was real and physical. And as a result of his research, he said that so many individuals around the world had seen structured technologically advanced craft and non-humans in association with that craft, that he believed that this was actually physical and not demonic, because nothing about it, from his understanding of that part of it at least, appeared to be demonic.
Thank you. Ben, I have a question for you. I don't know if anyone's looked into this recent development from, we're going to just go another 5 minutes or so, from Dr. Santilli about the reverse, a concave lens to a telescope instead of a convex. Has anyone heard that? He's claiming that he's able to see things now that you normally wouldn't see with your vision, and he's actually taken pictures, and there's some really weird objects. I'm going to try to talk to him more about that. You can find it online, I believe, under Dr. Santilli telescope or Santilli telescope. But Ben, I have a question for you. With the night vision that you sell and use all the time, does that pick up like a different spectrum of light that you normally wouldn't see? In other words, if it was daylight and this object's an object that goes across that people can see in this night vision, would they not see it in the daylight? Do you know?
It depends on what night vision you're using. Yeah, I mean, pretty much when people say night vision, we're talking about several different devices that look at different portions of the IR spectrum. So if you're looking at the really long wavelength IR, we get into thermal, so we're looking at heat. Some of those things, for example, can't be detected just by us going outside and looking into the sky. I have filmed triangles that I had a wireless video set up, and it was winter because I'm doing this a lazy way, sitting inside my house where it's nice, my friend's ranch where it's nice and warm, and the camera outside, we're watching on the big screen, picks up a triangle coming over the mountains. So I run out there, where is it? And I can't see it. And yet it's showing up on the screen, and we filmed this silent, very slow hovering triangle.
Wow.
So that shows up on thermal, which is heat signatures. Mm-hmm. You look at the other, we're familiar with the standard green tinted, military night vision.
Yep.
Most of that stuff is visible. There is a portion of it that will only see into the IR infrared lights, and that's why soldiers use those. But most of that is just light enhancing capability. So you're talking about 80,000 times the light amplification that you would see normally. So yes, it improves your vision, not necessarily by letting you see into a spectrum. It depends on what device you're using.
Yeah, great.
But I would add ultraviolet is a spectrum we haven't explored much of. And the ghost hunting groups are into this now, because you can take a normal camera and make it what we call full spectrum by removing the filters. That allows you to see into things where people are recording orbish lights and things like that in supposed haunted locations, but also outdoors. We're catching these lights doing dances in the sky, in a spectrum that we can't see.
Wow, does anyone know what the human eye can see compared to what's actually out there, like a percentage of the spectrum?
Well, I guess if we could, that's a cool device to make. There should be an app for it. If we could tap into the brain and take all electromagnetic energy, we could turn sounds into sights. We could turn infrared, X-ray. I mean, the full spectrum includes so much that we'd be able to see if we could do that. Some animals actually get a sensory, visual sense of some of those spectrums that we don't get. So I don't know where you'd put a number on that, but any electromagnetic energy, if you can turn it to a signal, transfer that to the brain, that would be amazing.
Yeah. All right, well, I'm going to wrap this up, and I'm just going to ask one last question and start with you, Ben. And I'm going to ask everyone to answer this, if you would, and that is, what do you think what type of sighting or what type of event do you think it would take where people would really come to their senses and say something is happening? I'm not talking about disclosure. I'm just talking about like, wow, we are really being visited. What type of event do you think it would take?
Great question. I don't have a very optimistic outlook on this.
Yeah.
Because I lecture on this all the time. We've had plenty of evidence already. plenty to convict the case in criminal court, as it were.
Yeah.
But I'm afraid that this notion of seeing is believing isn't quite what we think it is. And I've always said you could probably land a saucer on the White House lawn, put it on the 10 o'clock news, have someone go in and interview the occupants, spend all day with them, show them how the instruments work, how it flies, put it on the news. How many people are still not going to believe this happened?
Yeah.
We live in a very strange time where we don't trust our government, our politicians. We don't trust Bob down the street. And just because we see something doesn't mean you're going to create a paradigm shift for people. So what will it take? I don't know. The majority of people, I think you would have to have a Phoenix Lights type event, times 10 in every major city.
Yeah.
Before people are really going to be like, okay, stop what you're doing. Yeah, you got to go to work tomorrow, but what's more important? This is more important right now. This is what's going on.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's a good answer. Thank you. Do you want to address that question?
Well, I agree with what Ben said. And just before he talked about a Phoenix Lights event, I was thinking if we had a Phoenix Lights event during the daytime, a mass sighting, and it left Phoenix and it went to New York and it went to Tokyo and it appeared during the daytime before masses of people, then maybe more people would believe that it's true, because I find that those who actually have these events and see these objects, especially close up, have a paradigm shift in their thinking, and they can no longer deny that it's true, that it's false.
Yeah, very good.
My best bet would be an event where the media finally start doing their thing, when major television stations show up to film it. They get an advance alert, and I think then they would put it out over the wire. The word would spread very quickly if you had faith in those people. And so whether that's going to happen or not, I don't know. But one of the most interesting PhD theses about UFOs is the lousy press coverage that they've had. And maybe if times change, that suddenly somebody would wake up at a TV station and recognize that there's the equivalent of a Pulitzer Prize here, or something beyond that. And maybe then we'd finally all recognize, oh, you saw that, and I saw that, and they saw that, and everybody agrees it's real. That might change things, finally.
Yep.
Now, whether the government is prepared, in one of the important documents, there's a mention of a contingency plan. So I think the government's ready for somebody to do that. And whether it's ready to say, you guys are full of baloney, or indeed, for very good reasons, we've been keeping this secret, but times have changed. Look, it took us quite a while to admit that that U-2 aircraft was really ours, that was shot down by the Russians.
Mm-hmm.
We've been spying illegally over them for some time.
Yep.
But we first denied it. And then finally Eisenhower got up and said, hey, we had one Pearl Harbor, this is, and now suddenly everything changed. We admitted it, the Russians admitted it, and not that anybody liked it, but it changed the perception of what was going on quite a lot. So I think that's what it would take, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you. And Travis, you're the only one, I believe at this table that really knows 100% sure that these things exist.
Yeah, with
With your
total
experience.
confidence, but,
Yeah. But is that frustrating to you that no one else can, that the world doesn't accept it?
yeah, it is frustrating, and it's, a feeling of forever being set apart. It's not always a very comfortable feeling, but, outside of someone on the inside grabbing the files and running out and making it public, I don't know, even with that, they would probably just launch a campaign to discredit them.
Yep.
Just a great big crash near a highly populated area where thousands of people saw it, that would be pretty hard to cover up.
Yeah. Exactly. Super Bowl. All right, I want to say thank you all very, very much. It's been a lot of fun, and thanks so much for participating.
You're welcome.
All right. All right, everyone, thanks for listening live. I appreciate it, and we have no music. We had a little issue with the music, and sorry about the phone calls. That didn't work either. And so that's it. Next week, we have a guest, and I can't remember who it is because I'm having a wonderful time in Phoenix. And by the way, everyone, I drove out here from Maine. I don't know if anyone knows that. 2,800 miles, 3 days in the snow, and I love it here now that we're here. So thanks, everyone, and we'll be back next week. Keep your eyes to the sky.